Welcome to the Open Air Podcast. My name is Devang and Simon. I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Simon Bushel. Bush, the final slam of the season. It is always a bit jarring to come this quickly to the end of August, but here we are. Summer is almost over.
Sad times, Dev, and the end of the tennis season at the conclusion of the US Open. No, we're kidding. It keeps going for another 4 months after that.
It never ends. Yeah, that's a joke. But it does feel like the end of something in New York. And we record this as qualifying is well underway. We've seen some pretty ridiculous scenes already over there, including an altercation in the crowd involving Victor Troitsky, which seems very random and terrible. But that's New York, baby, as they say. Bush, we recorded last week in person. You're back in Vancouver now. And because we were in person, we recorded before that pretty stunning final on Sunday between Carlos Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic. There was also a pretty important win for Coco Gauff in Cincinnati as well. So we'll start there and then talk about the draw at the US Open, who we like, who we don't like, some storylines, some things that we're following. But the immediate reaction to this Djokovic Alcaraz match, Simon, was that this was potentially the best 3-set match of all time, at least in the men's division. And I have to be honest, it's pretty hard to argue against that. I think it had everything you could have wanted, including a random Novak bout with some sort of mysterious level drop / fatigue issue, but he recovered. We saw Alcaraz act his age a bit, which we don't often see considering how prolific he is at 20, but it had really everything, Simon, for the neutral. And even if you were a stan of either player, it was pretty special.
Had the whole thing, didn't it? As you mentioned. Anyone else notice that Carlos Alcaraz is throwing a few more tantrums over the last few weeks? We had a racket throw, which we never thought we'd see. We had him slamming his hand into the table. I mean, these are all very minor things in the grand scheme of things, but it is interesting nonetheless. Keeping an eye on that one. Dev, let me ask you an open question here. Did you or did you not like the Argentina-inspired Novak Djokovic kit?
The kits he has from Lacoste are consistently hitting. I don't think there's any doubt at all that they dress him the best, Bush. It's not close.
It's outrageous. To each their own, I suppose. This final...
It did feel funny that all of his coaches wearing Lacoste stuff, though, is a bit much. Like all of these guys looking like they came out of an outlet store down off the highway. But I think his fits are good.
Well, that's the most controversial opinion you'll hear on this Open Air podcast episode. This was an incredible final, wasn't it? And it even had the patented, at this point, Novak Djokovic meltdown. Carlos Alcaraz should have won on this match. I think that is undoubtedly true at this point. And it is great credit to Novak Djokovic that he overcame the young Spaniard, but I think Carlos Alcaraz is going to want this one back, is he not? Being up a set and a break, his opponent in all sorts of trouble, and he sort of let him off the hook. And I think it produced an incredible match in that third set, had all the momentum swings back and forth. We had match points saved on both sides, and it turned into an incredible match. But I think it maybe is a controversial opinion to say that I think the third set was fantastic and the first two were not that great, meh. A bit more meh than people want to make out. And I know there's all that stuff. When we're just reacting after it just happened, everyone's going to say it's the greatest match of all time. I think that third set is phenomenal, and I would not want to take away from it. But the rest of it,
Yeah, and it did that thing that a lot of these matches did between, say, the big three, where it got better as it went along. So it allowed us maybe to forget when it wasn't so good. Like, I think as well, towards the end of the second set, the level was increasing and we got a pretty special tiebreak performance from the best tiebreak player of all time. But yeah, I think you're onto something there. Like, Novak's level was very hit or miss, and it looked like he just went away completely at the end of the first set. But the age difference was striking to me, the 16-year thing, and the fact that it was 9 million degrees on court, and how close I am in age to Novak, I could empathize. So I'm like, yeah, he's getting run over by this kid. Like, this is happening sooner than we expected. But I think where we're left now, and I saw Geary Nathan mention this in a great piece in The Defector, but for the first time in a while, like this tour, the men's side is defined so much so by these two guys that we are just now waiting to see when they'll meet again. And the rest of the stuff not that it doesn't matter, but it pales in comparison. And I know Yannick Sinner and Holger Rune and the like will try and change that and reinsert themselves into the conversation, but it just it feels so heavily dependent on these two meeting again to get any sort of finality about where the tour is at on the men's side.
Yeah, agreed. It really does feel like a two-person tour, although I still think Danny Medvedev has something to say on a hard court, although it didn't look too hot, it has to be said. I go back to it. There was some interesting tactical stuff in this match, I thought. I've never seen Novak Djokovic hit so many backhands up above his head, the way that Carlos Alcaraz was very tactically astute to try and use that wing. And it's one of those strange things, again, for the greatest backhand of all time on Novak Djokovic's side, to see a bunch of errors flying off that wing as well. And it goes to show you that how good Carlos Alcaraz is to get under his skin and force that wing to break down the way it is. These two are just so rock solid from the baseline, and I don't think we're going to see any blowouts other than if someone completely goes away or we have an injury or anything. These two are going to be playing a very close match for the rest of Novak Djokovic's career, I think. Another
thing I'm curious to see if it develops or how much it develops is the fact that Alcaraz is maybe going to push Novak to extend his window at the top a bit longer, because he's still maybe not at his peak, but he's still very close. I feel like he's still a very special player, even at 36 years old and on the back nine of his career. But yeah, that was pretty remarkable. I do like a lot of these matches push through the tennis mainstream and they reach the wider sport fan. But I did find it a bit hilarious that the Cincinnati Masters, Simon, was the thing that everyone was talking about in the sports world on a Sunday night. I'm like, it literally was the perfect spot in the calendar for this to be a big hit, because they weren't competing with much.
Oh, the massive slander towards the NFL preseason, Devang. I mean, goodness me.
And like one Sunday night baseball game, like there really wasn't that much going on. I think they got the opposite luck of what the people in Montreal had. Let's say that regarding the weather and regarding the timing. But that was a massive moment, Simon. I think also, and probably because of what we saw later in that nearly 4-hour epic. But Coco Gauff had a massive week, Simon, and she finally beat Iga Swiatek for the first time in 8 gazillion attempts. But don't want to overstate what one win means. But to beat Iga for the first time in 8 tries, beat someone that she's going to have to beat at the US Open to win a slam, because they're on a collision course once again. This felt like a very important time in Coco Gauff's career. And I think we can chalk this all to Brad Gilbert, or like 90% Brad Gilbert, right?
No, the player doesn't get any credit anymore. That's how it works in the sport of tennis.
It's coaching, man. X's and O's, not Jimmy's and Joe's.
Absolutely. I'm going to sound like I'm posting on, I don't know if Tennis Circle Jerk exists here, but if it doesn't, we're going to make our own version of it on Open Era.
Yikes.
I know, Jesus. And I'm going to sound like a lunatic here, and I don't mean this to. I swear to God, I do watch a lot of tennis.
Always positive when someone begins a sentence with "I'm going to sound like a lunatic." So I'm very curious to see where this goes.
Jesus, like Iga Swiatek should have won that match. Goodness me. I know. Okay. Like it's
yeah.
Greatest of respect, and I think Coco Gauff, incredible few weeks that she's had and the results that she's had and getting this win and all that kind of stuff. And maybe this is, I'm looking at this with the same lens that I look at Carlos Alcaraz as well. He really should have won that match from the position that he was in and the way that he was playing. You go back and look at everything from the Swiatek and Gauff match, is that Swiatek won more points. She created 14 breakpoint opportunities. She almost had 20 more points, receiving points won. She was all over Gauff. She created tons and tons and tons of chances. Doesn't really matter though. She still lost. But I think it's one of those that 9 times out of 10, Iga Swiatek wins this match. And that sounds like me throwing complete cold water over this win, but I really do believe that.
It reminded me a bit of the semifinal in Montreal between Pegula and Iga, in the sense that I caught an eye Joe aside. I feel like Iga probably shouldn't have lost that match either. And JPEG and Coco Gauff are similar in some regard. I don't want to say they're that similar in terms of game styles, but I think Coco's forehand has become pretty important once again and become a game changer, which is obviously great to see. I can see. I don't know. I really don't know what to make of Iga at this point. I feel like she's obviously still in the conversation to win this U.S. Open, and I would not be shocked at all if she's there at the end in the semifinals at least. But I also wouldn't be shocked if something strange happened around that fourth round quarterfinal area. And by strange, I mean she ends up playing Coco again, and Coco can keep this going mentally and use what she had against Iga in Cincinnati in New York as well. Because I mean the track record speaks for itself, but the luster or maybe the domination aura for Iga is off just a tad for me, Bush.
I think that is true, yeah. I think almost certainly it's worn down a little bit from where it was a year and a half ago, just given the season that she had and given the overall stature that she had on tour. There is patterns, if you want to look for patterns, between the win that Gauff had and the win that Pegula had as well, is that in no capacity I'm going to say that they were pushing, but they were much more patient, I would say. And the errors which came off Swiatek's racket were unexpected in a way that we haven't seen those errors. So I think previously she would have got many more cheap points out of Coco Gauff, and it didn't quite happen here. All that being said, I still think she got a shit ton of cheap points, and I still think she should have won this match. But there's enough signs there, and I think there's enough of a game plan that's starting to materialize here, where if you can hang in rallies and remain competitive and athletic and wait for your spots and not have to go out and try and hit her off the court, you've seen a level of fallibility in the Swiatek forehand this season, which I haven't seen in the previous two.
Yeah, Iga's serve as well. Like in the JPEG match, the serve was very, very bad. I think she faced 19 breakpoint opportunities, which is quite poor. And I think she faced 7 breakpoint opportunities against Coco, which isn't that bad. But I think the serve for me is also something that I've been noticing a bit. Iga's struggling mightily winning second serve points. And when she's not firing and she's not feeling that first serve, she's putting herself in unenviable positions on her serve against players that are excellent from the baseline, like your JPEGs, like your Coco Gauffs, and that's no way to survive on the hard courts as they get quicker, because I imagine this will be the quickest so far, even though Cincinnati was not very fast at all towards the end, Simon. So I think that's maybe, aside from obviously Novak being Novak, and the king is not dead, he's still kicking very much so. I thought Coco Gauff winning was a big omen for New York, but do you take anything else away from Cincinnati, big picture wise?
I thought it was a really interesting week from Karolina Muchova as well, just to back up the results that she had in Paris and her ability to play on multiple surfaces. I think she's inside the world's top 10 now, as in the results of this week as well. She's just a really damn good player, and it's so good to see, Dev, because she's obviously very aesthetically pleasing to watch as a tennis player. She strikes an incredible ball, the variety that she has, the brain that she has on a tennis court. Always the bridesmaid, though. Goodness me. I will see her win a big title. I will see her win a Grand Slam. I'm sure of it in the tennis watching days, but it bodes well, I think, because she's a really dangerous player given the speed of the court and the balls and everything at Arthur Ashe. Watch out for her. I think she's going to make some noise.
Talk about someone you want to avoid desperately if you're the quote-unquote big three. She's in Section 4, poor Maria Sakkari, because I don't think she's making it out of that section at all, Bush, but potentially Rybakina in the quarterfinals, which would be excellent. Let's stay then on the WTA side and turn to the US Open, Simon. The draw is out. I was laughing. I posted on the Discord. There's one section, maybe the most interesting section, with maybe a zillion qualifiers in it, but also in it, Coco Gauff, Mira Andreeva, who could meet in the second round, which would be a battle of the next wave of tennis stars who will be around for many years. Caroline Wozniacki's here. Kvitova's here. Jen Brady's back, with a protected ranking, and Danielle Collins is here as well. Is there any section in particular that stood out to you, Simon, as we take a big picture view first?
I mean, I think you mentioned it already. It's that second quarter, right? It's the gauntlet of players that are going to have to go through Elena Rybakina, Karolina Markova, Maria Sakkari, Beatrice Haddad-Maia, Sloane Stevens, Marta Kostyuk, Victoria Azarenka. I mean, goodness me.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Not a bad quarter, is it? It's there's a lot of stuff going on in that section. And I think you could actually make the case of just about any of these quarters on the WTA side. I thought the ATP draw wasn't the most riveting. Maybe that Milos first round is the most interesting thing that's going to happen.
That'll be funny.
He's going to win, sure. He should win that match.
I would not be surprised if he's favored in this match against the 7th-seeded Steph Tsitsipas. But if recent history is any indicator, Milos is going to win that match, which is why he probably won't, because tennis is a funny game and it never works out like it should. I will mention, if Leylah and Bianca can win their first round matches, they're on a collision course, which would be fun in the second round. In the very least, it would guarantee a Canadian in the third round, which outside of this looks maybe unlikely. They both have tough matchups in the first round. I mean, I mentioned Rybakina, but I mean, she's had a weird year since the Australian Open, and I think there's been injuries. There's been things outside of her control. Clearly, the weather in Montreal being one of them. But I think this is going to be a big tournament on the WTA side for Iga and Sabalenka, and because this is about the number one ranking, because they backed up their resume and then some this season, and yet there does seem to be some fallibility for both of them, and it's because Sabalenka has lost to someone like Markova a couple times now in recent fashion. But do you lean one way or the other in terms of who has more pressure on them in New York?
That's a really good question. In terms of pressure on them, I kind of feel like to a certain degree, Anya Sabalenka is already playing with house money for the majority of this season, winning a first slam and really ascending to the point of the sport that she'd never been to before. I feel like she can come into this tournament and just kind of have a free swing at it, and her free swing may actually result in her winning this tournament, which is kind of funny. Whenever you're the world number one, you always have pressure on you. Whenever you're the way that you hold yourself on tour and the stature and the aura that you have on tour, I think there's always pressure. I think, to answer your question, Iga Swiatek, I would say out of just about anyone out of both draws has the most pressure going on her going into this tournament.
Yeah, and I think there's a bit of a blueprint here, and I'll be fascinated. I mean, if she plays Coco Gauff in the quarterfinals, that'll be a night match most likely, and the atmosphere will be charged / electric / a party. And I don't think Iga's going to be the fan favorite, and I wonder where she's at when that happens, or if that happens. Like, what happens to her mentally? How does she deal with it? I'll be fascinated by that, because I think generally she's well liked, but she's not loved just yet outside of a few specific places. For the men, Simon, I mean, we know there's a couple guys that can prevent Alcaraz, Djokovic. There's also a couple things, including injury, that could prevent that as well, that final. But if you had to be a betting man and you had to choose something or someone, who could it be that would prevent us from getting a replay of the Wimbledon final in the final here? Because I think Novak in New York is a bit of hit and miss. He's not normally peaking at this time. I think the reason why Cincinnati was important is because he's had some problems there as well, but it kind of coincides with the fact that maybe he's running out of gas at this point in the season. Is it an injury that could stop this, or is there someone that you're leading or tipping towards that could prevent a Alcaraz final?
Alcaraz, very good. So the answer is Danny Medvedev. However,
you seem very confident in this. Yeah.
It's the cop-out answer, seeing as I've been riding this train for a significant period of time. So I can't get off the train, Devang. Yeah, it's going fair. Too quickly.
That's fair.
I do think there's a couple of people that I think we should watch. Obviously, everyone's going to circle the Jannik Sinner match if it happens, just given the 5-hour marathon they had last year. And I do think on this surface, I think Jannik Sinner has a good chance to beat Carlos Alcaraz. I don't think Jannik Sinner has a good opportunity to beat Novak Djokovic in the final if that's to happen. But that's something that's way, way far away. One other name that I would circle on this as well, just given the form that he has and given the crowd, is Tommy Paul. I think he has a real opportunity to make some noise. And if he gets to the quarterfinal stage or even further than that, I think he has a real opportunity to make some players very uncomfortable, is what I would say about him.
Potential quarterfinal or a fourth round encounter with Holger Rune would be very interesting. Bublik team in the first round. I feel like that's going to be fun and sad at the same time. I do have one other flyer. Like I think in terms of who could stop this, I feel like someone like Casper Ruud is going to have an upsettingly good run, not to really challenge anything, but make it deep and probably be that guy that gets smoked by Novak in the semis. So I could definitely see a world where that happens. And I do want to see Alex de Minaur follow up what he was able to do in Toronto with a strong showing in New York, because I think that potential rematch with Danny Medvedev would be interesting in the fourth round. But I feel like Felix has had such a bad year, tough year, up and down year, injured year. A win against someone like Mackie McDonald could kickstart a little small mini run for someone who could maybe find something in New York. Maybe that's more hoping than actual a good feeling. That's just a sentimental pick, but it's a bit chalk for me, Bush. I do want to see them in another final. I think there's a few players that can disrupt that, including Daniil Medvedev, Jannik Sinner, but we'll see. Any parting thoughts, closing thoughts on the draws on either side?
Yeah, what to make of Holger Rune? That's the one that I really find interesting. You realize during the course of the week that he's inside the world's top 5 now. He's the world number 4. Goodness me. He's kind of snuck up on everyone. I think I was saying at the start of the year, it wouldn't be surprised maybe he ended world number 1 and won a Grand Slam. He's not a million miles away from that. I think it'd be pretty close. I think if he wins this title, I think he gets up to 3 if he wins this title, which is still pretty damn incredible. The Americans will be interesting to watch as well, to see how Francis Tiafoe follows up from last year. That fourth round encounter, if he gets to Casper Ruud, would be really interesting, and I'd like to see it. The women's side is a bit of a mixed bag. I think those big 3 still hold true in this tournament. Rybakina's had that really sort of strange in-between period, right, where no one's really expecting anything of her, but I still think she's head and shoulders above almost the entire tour, and I'm really excited to see what she does in this tournament.
I definitely thought when I saw Novak drew Muller in the first round, I'm like, Gilles Muller is still playing? Like, what the hell? How old is this guy? But then obviously it was not him, because this man is French and not from Luxembourg. Shouts to Gilles Muller, who is 40 now. But blast from the past. I missed that guy. I missed Gilles Muller and his cap.
The Muller Report.
Muller Report, right. Well done.
Geez, okay. Remember that? What a time.
Okay. I was about to make a Donald Trump comment, but I stopped myself. You're welcome, everyone. You're welcome. Okay. We'll wait to drop our predictions in the second half of the show, which is going to be parting shots. So we'll drop our predictions after the break and get into parting shots, including news about Saudi Arabia, new system for player support on the ATP, and plenty more coming up next on Open Era.
Welcome back to the Open Era podcast. Devang, it is time as always for parting shots, and I guess we should kick off our parting shots with some predictions. We are on the record of being never wrong, ever. I can't remember us ever making an incorrect prediction on this show. Please give me the women's singles champion for the 2023 US Open.
I mentioned trying to go less hard, go more heavy and analytical, or try and play some recent trends, but why not do both? I think Coco Gauff will win the US Open. She's going to beat Jess Pegula in the final, an all-American affair. It's going to be all America all the time. two good friends battling it out, but Coco will win there. And then on the men's side, I kind of called it a bit earlier before the break. I like Novak to play Carlos again. I think it's going to happen. I think we're in that Fed Nadal stage when it was all about the two of them navigating their ways through the draw and seeing if they can make it through. But I think they both will. And I'll pick Carlos to win again in the slam. So Carlos, Gauff. How about you?
That's an interesting prediction. So we have the same men's champion. I'm picking Carlos Alcaraz, which is not particularly exciting.
Shocking.
Women's champion. I know. The other shocking one as well. So I'm torn here. I basically am picking between the big three, the quote unquote big three on the women's side. Depending on which day I wake up on, I would pick a different one based upon their record and based upon how they've looked on the hard court season. I don't think Rybakina is winning this tournament. I think it's been
too weird.
Let's go with the season. I don't know. Let's go with the world number one. Jesus, let's go for the world number one on both sides. It's not the most interesting prediction, but it feels the most accurate to me. Boring, Dev. Incredibly boring.
And boring, but I think it's going to be interesting to see how they get there, if they get there. Because I imagine there's going to be some landmines along the way, but to see how they navigate them, if they can, will be fascinating. All right, so Bush goes Iga and Carlos. I'm going Coco and Carlos. Just not that surprising, but yeah, can't hate us for those picks, really.
Oh, we can, absolutely. Let's get into parting shots, and let's talk about a pretty interesting week off the court from a news perspective. Yeah. The ATP dropped a new system they've been working on for a while named Baseline, which is a player support system, which we'll get into in a second. The only reason they keep it till second is because potentially... Is Saudi Arabia funding this? Where's the money coming from, Dev? I'm speaking, of course, about how the next gen tournament finals are heading to Jeddah, to Saudi Arabia. In our predictions at the start of the season, said that there was going to be a Grand Slam or a Masters 1000s, which was heading to Jeddah and to Saudi Arabia. Does this count as a prediction correct? Or am I stretching it too far? I'll give it to you,
yeah. No, I'll give it to you. I checked with the judges and they say that, yeah, you cleared it. So well done, sir. You completed it, as they say.
Did you see the money involved, by the way? What the prize pool was?
Yeah, the increase is considerable, isn't it?
$2 million prize pool. That's a significant amount of money to... I know these players are all next gen, but a win at this tournament is a significant bump to a lot of them, and in terms of getting a leg up on the competition going into the 2024 season. There's a lot to be excited about, I think, as one of these next gen players, although, it's extremely questionable about the direction of the way the tour's going and where this event ends up.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first. There's going to be plenty more. There's going to be plenty more WTA events as well that end up in Saudi Arabia. And I think a fair point was made by Pog and Josh in the Discord. There's plenty of events hosted in America, and Lord knows they have a very questionable record when it comes to human rights among many other things, right? So I mean, there's that. But yeah, this is interesting because I think the timing, Bush, like you mentioned or alluded to, ATP Baseline, what this is, and how much money they're putting forward on this trial period. 3-year trial, which begins in 2024. It's quite the investment, and it does feel like, yes, this is being funded not so blatantly by the Saudis, but it does feel like that it's fair to make that correlation.
I think the timing is asking questions nonetheless, whether or not it's smoke and fire, who knows on this one, but it seems to me like there's some connection there, and maybe we can get that cleaned up over the next few months as we start to learn more details about how this program's going to work. We should say off the top, Dev, more than anything else, Baseline by ATP, which sounds like a fucking album, but whatever, we'll keep going, or a group or a band or whatever. I think this is a really good first step. I think this is actually a very, very well timed and important first step in terms of transitioning to be a more equitable tour and to make it easier for players to earn a living and for some parity to exist in the sport. The devil will really be in the details on this one, because what is written in a press release and what is written by the ATP themselves on this is almost certainly not what this program is going to be. So we will wait with bated breath to see how this one shakes out, but at least like benefit of the doubt from what we've read so far and how it's been unveiled, I think this is a very, very excellent program. Yeah,
I highly recommend checking out the press release about this, because they go into some detail. But yeah, I think you're fully correct, Simon, about the devil being in the details and seeing how this is actually implemented. But things like guaranteed base earnings and being able to plan out your season with injury protection, with this newcomer investment, with these things that allow you to maybe look 8 months into the future comfortably and not having to plan for something that's completely unpredictable, like a freak injury or something like that. So I think that is positive. We'll see how this is introduced. The times are changing though, Simon. I think the capital on display where the next gen tour is going, that final in Jeddah, is also the home of a team that's launching a massive bid for Mo Salah from Liverpool as well. The money it's going to keep coming, and we're going to see more and more events head over there in the near future.
I mean, sports washing works, does it not? In the same way that nation building works historically. If you want to look at either the United Kingdom or the United States or any of these sort of Western powerhouses, they have often used art and sport to cover up atrocities. Obviously, there's no difference with what's going on in Saudi Arabia. I mean, I do accept the point in the sense that you really can't offer a difference between the two states. The United States is awful in terms of its human rights record and in terms of its involvement with certainly South American states, and it's continued. I mean, you look at the level of poverty, and it's cruel in terms of how it sets things up. At least we should forget the state of Saudi Arabia did murder a journalist not too long ago. So it's and continues to commit human rights atrocities every single day. I do think there is a line that has to be drawn here somewhere, and I find this quite often in terms of discussions around political colleagues or people that sort of are in and around that world, is that I think theoretically, and you kind of have to get out of the theory sometimes, is that yes, like you can see the association between both states, but I do think you have to sometimes, draw a line in the sand and make a statement and sort of come down on a side here. And it kind of sucks, and there's a bunch of whataboutism for saying, why are you playing in the United States? But I do think if the ATP or any sports league had said, we're not going to Saudi Arabia for this reason, I also think that is a perfectly respectable and fine thing to do. And I am a fucking liberal, Dev. Look at me go.
Woo! Woo!
Foreign policy.
All right.
Jesus Christ.
From one liberal to another, Bush, John Isner.
The ultimate lib. So what are your memories of John Isner in terms of, we should sort of specify for everyone else that John Isner is retiring after the US Open, the winner of the longest match in tennis history, a 0-time Grand Slam winner, but a multiple-time Open era favorite in our hearts. This is a joke, by the way. I'm not that excited to see him go, but I'm very excited to see him go. Dev, what are your thoughts about the big man retiring here?
Memories. I think, I've been on the record. I was not a John Isner fan in the sense of like watching him play. I didn't enjoy it very much. I'll remember the hat being backwards. I'll remember the lank and the huge serve. I'll remember him being tricky sometimes for the big players. I think he notched a victory against Novak, Rafa, Roger, Murray, and Stan, which is weirdly cool. And I'll give him that respect. He won Miami in 2018, that weird time. But yeah, I mean, the Mahou match, it's still bizarre to me that happened. And I think we'll always have that. We'll always have the weirdness of this match. But in terms of like style, I think John Isner not being around, in one way, I will miss maybe the carnival aspect of this tall, lanky man raining down bombs and not much else.
Quote John Isner following a press conference at the US Open last year. I'd love to have Trump come watch me. That would be awesome. Maybe I'll tweet at him if I win on Wednesday. I know a lot of people won't.
Is that
like
real? Is that a real
care.
quote? That's not real. Is that
before
real?
Before the show, I was going to go into it
slandering?
and like do a comparison piece between the Republican primary quotations and a John Isner Twitter quote and see which one you could pick out and see the difference between the two. Didn't quite get there in time.
Is that quote real? Is that Trump thing real?
Someone might want to fact check that one. It's a bit of a dodgy source that I pulled it from. Let's say yes and go with that, and we can always issue an apology.
I mean, at this point, nothing would surprise me.
With apologies to the Trump estate. No, sorry, to the Isner estate. Freudian slip and all that sort of stuff. Let's chat about Adrian Manarino briefly. So Adrian Manarino has had himself a good hard court season so far. Lost in the quarterfinals in Cincinnati. Had himself, somewhat of a disappointing Canadian Open, but he's played well so far this season, as exemplified by the fact that he's nearly at his career high ranking. And we talked about how Novak Djokovic was still turning back the clock and performing at a high level at the age of 36. Adrian Manarino is just 9 months younger than Novak Djokovic, and he's about to reach a career high ranking. Dev, that is a phenomenal achievement for someone whose game looks fairly similar to someone playing pickleball.
Adrian Manarino, 7 days younger than me. That's how close his birthday is to mine. Good God. Respect to Tennis Zidane. Like his fit, like his chrome dome, like that he gives players of all sizes problems every now and then. He's a player that I feel like you might have seen him in a public court. It's possible, a game like that, but it's translatable to the biggest tournaments in the world, and it's just a style that seems not easy, but easily repeatable, and I appreciate that.
He's a really clean ball striker, isn't he? Makes it look effortless. Makes it look like he's not even trying on court. You don't hang around to the age of 35 unless you have absolutely perfect, crisp technique in the way that he does. Other thing to note about Adrian Manarino, good to have a bald man inside of the top 50, isn't it? Not many bald men.
Play bald, bald representation, yeah. The Play Bald Consortium, happy to welcome Adrian Manarino into the fold. I mean, another one of those guys as well, where it's like, if you see him in your section, it's not pleasant. You're like, oh, God, okay, well, this is going to be a slog.
It will indeed. Bit of news that I was reading today that I'll sneak in here is that Jimmy Butler is going to be playing tennis again. He'll be playing with Francis Tiafoe at the US Open in a event held for the country of Ukraine. Jimmy Butler really likes tennis, doesn't he? I love how he gets into it.
Yeah, I saw. Yeah,
dude beats to his own drum, it has to be said.
Saw him involved during some events during the qualifying as well. So he's clearly a big tennis guy.
He respects the hustle, doesn't he? I think he respects just about anyone who's good at sport. I don't know. Thoughts on Jimmy Butler overall? I don't know enough about him, but like the things that I have seen periodically from him, he seems like a really interesting dude, and actually someone that is like pretty for some of the things that we've heard coming out of NBA players recently. He's actually one of the good ones in the sound of things. Yeah,
I mean, I think I don't know. I wouldn't call myself a super fan of his. I do respect the ability that he has to like raise his level when it matters, quote unquote, in the playoffs. I think that's special, that trait, but I think the shtick is a bit much for me. I don't know, maybe I'm post-Butler. I'm in my post-Butler era where I get it. He goes against the grain. He's dating Shakira. Cool. But I don't know, Bush. Maybe it's just the celebrity phase is what I'm done with.
Post-Butler and post-Kanyas, 2 weeks running.
Yes.
Can we do a retrospective on Guillermo Caminus? We have to do that at some point, do we not?
Deal. In honor of our almost name. Let's
wrap up some ranking stuff before we get into the ridiculous section, into the shit posting section of Parting Shots. Just a stat that I thought was interesting, just looking at the top 10 on the ATP and the WTA side. 5 of the 10 on the WTA are under the age of 25, but it is a young man's game on the ATP, Dev. 8 of the top 10 are under the age of 25. The only 2 outstanding from that are, of course, Novak Djokovic and Dani Medvedev. It's kind of snuck up on us quickly, but the next gen, or next gen,
it's here.
It's here. It's not. We're not waiting for it. It's fully happening.
I like how Dani Medvedev is the elder statesman in this group at 27. Like, oh god, it's washed.
Unacceptable. Dev, to wrap up putting shots, let's turn our attention to Serena Williams. First of all, she gave birth to her second child, making it is the clock now ticking? Is the countdown now on for her return to the tennis courts?
Where are we at on that? Are you confident on this still, or are you?
Wait a minute. Am I confident on her returning to the tennis courts? Is that what you're?
Yeah.
Is that you're implying?
I am.
Am I being gaslit?
That's what
here?
I said. Yeah. I can't remember if it was me jokingly confident that she was coming back. I know I've said Ash Barty is coming back, but I don't think Serena is. I think this is it. I think she's done. There's no way she's coming back.
Someone check the record on that. Swear to God, Devang and Simon was fully banging the table on this one.
Hey, people change, man. People change. Twitter is called X now.
The name of the child, by the way, Adira River. When I first read it, I thought it was Adria, which I thought.
So did I. I was like, was this in honor of the famous cursed tennis tournament that gave half of Europe COVID? Is that what this is honor of? Wow, an interesting callback.
The Adria Tour. What a time.
Memories.
Let's wrap up parting shots with two quick fire ones. After winning the Cincinnati Masters, Coco Gauff went out of her way to praise the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Devang, if you were to win your first Masters 1000 tournament, who would you thank in your victory speech?
Oh, come on. I mean...
And would it be your co-host?
Yeah, I think I would probably thank you. I mean, if I had somehow won a Masters 1000 event, I imagine I went through a rigorous training exercise that you helped out with. So probably thank you, my family, of course.
And the team, thanks to the sponsors and the ball kids.
To be honest. I'd probably thank Roger. I'd be like, Roger, I know you couldn't be here today. You said you were busy, but this is for you, Fed. Thank you. And then I'd raise my bandana that I wore in solidarity. Honor. Yeah. Yeah. What about you?
I was thinking about this and wondering whether or not I should ask ChatGPT to write a tennis winner's speech because they're so predictable at this point. First of all, thank you to your team. What a great week. A
great week. You work so hard behind the scenes, everyone.
You'll be back. Everyone loves you. You're really respected in the locker room. Second of all, it's an honor to play in front of these fans. They're the best fans in the world. Thank you.
They don't even bother with that anymore. You notice they don't even bother with the best because it's fact checkable. It's easily fact checkable whether or not they are the best fans.
Thirdly, thank you to Raytheon, to Lockheed Martin, to
my sponsors.
So yeah,
Monsanto for the Green Growth Initiative.
Exactly, Tim Hortons. That's right, we're lumping them all together.
All right, let's wrap it up here.
Did you see this final link that I put into
I did. What the hell is this?
ATP and Sense Arena partner to launch virtual reality tennis training program. This is the most ridiculous looking thing of this launch window and this image that they have chosen. It's absolutely ridiculous, Dev. So I don't understand how this works. So you're wearing the headset and you're still swinging the tennis racket? Is that what's happening here?
Sounds like it. It sounds like it's like a training thing, like for players to do. So if they're not at the court, they can do tennis stuff, like tennis movements. I don't know. It looks cool, but it does feel like something that will further separate the divide between the haves and have-nots. Or maybe I'm just scared of technology. I'm not sure. Initially, I was laughing at it, but then I'm like, I wonder what they could simulate.
I'm kind of on the record of thinking that VR is just a just to complete another like AstroTurf. It's just there to people to pump money into. It's like, look at the product.
It feels like they've been trying.
Shit.
They've been trying for a while. They've been trying for a while with this thing. But yeah, I think that's, yeah, I get what you're saying here.
It's one of those that's really like, oh, the promise. You're buying this and you're buying the idea that it's going to be great one day. Well, I'm kind of buying something now and it's kind of shit. So I don't know what that means about the current version of the product. Anyway, let's go to 2 challenges remaining, Dev. What was your week like since the last time I saw you?
It's pretty good. I headed to Ottawa. Always a good time in Ottawa, where I went to school, and where my partner and we went to school at the same time. So it's going to be cool heading back there. But I don't know, Simon, it feels like the days are kind of jammed together now as we count down till September, so much so that I nearly forgot what I have done the last week. But I will shout out, how about this? Well, I mean, this is a bit strange because it'll be a bit dated by the time you hear this, but I'm not as big into wrestling as I once was, I'd say. Like I think I vaguely keep up, and I know what's going on from time to time, but I do recall being pretty fascinated by Bray Wyatt's character when he was in WWE, and like the Wyatt family and that whole storyline, and saw news just before we recorded Bush that he passed away at 36. But that was a shock, extremely young. Really, really sad news. But I sadly getting really used to seeing wrestlers that I grew up watching not make it long into their life and pass away under tragic circumstances. But I saw Terry Funk passed away this week as well, and I know he lived a really long, colorful life. But it's quite sad to see this Bray Wyatt news.
It's incredibly sad. It really is. And I would share that with you as well. Like an incredible performer, someone who I think has did have a wonderful mind, really creative mind in terms of how he approached the business and how his character evolved throughout his very, very tragically short professional career. It's another in a long line of wrestlers who die too young, Dev. Someone who under the age of 40. It's a brutal business. It really is. And it sucks because I really enjoyed watching him, and he will be sadly missed.
All right. That is another episode of the Open Era podcast. Hope you enjoy all of the US Open action over the next 2 weeks. We'll be back, of course, with a mid-tournament check-in. A reminder, we're on patreon.com/Open Era. Simon just shared the Trump mugshot in our Discord, and now I'm horribly distracted. Oh my God. Why? We're on patreon.com/Open Era. Join us there. Get the show ad free. Get it early on Sundays. Plus, you join the best tennis Discord in the whole damn land, where we'll be chatting tennis all throughout the US Open. So join us on patreon.com/Open Era. That is it for producer Dylan on the ones and twos, and for Simon. Thank you so much for listening to Open Era. We'll talk to you next week.